Today is a great day for the podcast. My name is Jody Luke, and I'm the executive director of Love Does and the host of the Love Does podcast. And so many of our stories with regard to Love Does require us to cross an ocean. But there are no more powerful stories than the one with another body of water just up the street from us. Our headquarters are in San Diego. It's on the San Francisco Bay. San Quentin State Prison is the oldest prison in California. I think it was built in the 1850s, and it houses the largest condemned population, in other words, death row. And it's currently home to 3,200 incarcerated men. Many of them are known for some pretty notorious crimes. And Bob Goff, the founder of Love Does and also a best-selling author of a number of books, connected with the warden there several years ago, and they started a class. And Love Does gets to be a part of it. It's one of my most favorite things I get to do. And we go up periodically and we get to discuss issues like grace and redemption and forgiveness. And we also get to talk about purpose and what does that look like as that plays out in everybody's life. Love Does also has launched a scholarship program there and a bunch of other initiatives. But today on the podcast, we get to have a man I deeply respect, Branden Terrell, and he was incarcerated at San Quentin for a number of years. We met a long time ago. I think we bonded pretty quickly over sports and life. You're a great baseball player, faith and family. And you were, Branden was one of the founding members of our class and then was part of the leadership team there and was really impactful in that. He was released last year, and he is a powerful example of what second chances can do. So I'm really excited to have Branden. I know his wife, Lacey. They are friends, and I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. So welcome.
Jody, thank you so much. That was a quite an introduction. I loved it.
Well, that's great. That's a good start. Hey, so tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, my name is Branden Terrell, as you said. Obviously, I spent some time at San Quentin. I spent almost 11 years. 6 of those was at San Quentin. Made some horrible decisions growing up in my younger days. But it didn't always, come from a place of, how should I say that? The trouble started after high school, as I kind of just was going through life aimlessly because I didn't have sports, which was kind of where I found my identity. And so growing up, it was my hopes and dreams to be a professional athlete, specifically baseball, although I loved football. In 11th grade, I was expelled. And from that day forward, it was like a ticking time clock for me to enter a prison cell. That happened when I committed my crime and took Ryan's life in 2012. And I went off to prison for almost 11 years. I don't think today I live with a lot of, not necessarily shame or guilt. I was obviously found guilty of my actions. But I just carry a heavy heart. And every day I wake up, I try to do better for people just because of what I've taken from this world. And so grateful for my wife, Lacey, our amazing kids, our dogs, all my friends like yourself and Bob and Drew, and just super happy to be here. And in any way I could share my story to help add value or have impact in people's lives, I'm always willing to do that.
Branden, prison can be a dark place. And it was always interesting to me because when I would go to our class, you would always have a kind of an unmistakable joy about you. And that was kind of unique. And I know it wasn't always like that. So can you kind of describe what it's like to be in prison and some of those moments that it was like, oh, this is real? And then how you kind of became a bright light in a dark place?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that jails are physical, prison is internal. Yes, I was serving time in prison, but I think many people in this world walk around with their own prisons, whether it's a spiritual thing, emotional thing, mental thing. And for me, I was in prison long before I was actually detained. And that's just because I didn't know Jesus. And um, I didn't have real freedom. I didn't have freedom within. Ultimately, like, no one could take your freedom. Like, we have the choice to live free spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. And so it was a long road to get to that place. And it was actually May 21st, 2016, when I really met Jesus. I was doing a year in solitary confinement. Actually, it was a hole for death row. They call it the Adjustment Center. It's probably the most secure and darkest.
You did a year? It was an entire year?
Almost a year, yeah.
Wow.
And you know the place because it's directly
Mm.
across the from the chapels. So it's like you have this chapel inside San Quentin, which is just a place of hope and light and faith. And then about 55, 60 yards across the courtyard is the hole for death row, a very dark place. And so,
San Quentin is a unique, I mean, it looks unique. It is this kind of cross because it's so old between Alcatraz and Shawshank. I mean, it's kind of that classic look. So, I mean, that's kind of the backdrop behind where you're talking about, right?
yeah, yeah. And, a lot of people, when you walk in, there's a beautiful garden, there's a chapel, you see the big new hospital. Um, but it definitely is a unique place. And obviously you guys are always blessed to go there and take friends there. But um, when I really experienced that true freedom was when I actually was quiet enough and still enough and undistracted to where I could, through prayer, was finally able to hear God's calling, hear God speak to me. And I just got on my knees and really gave my life to him. And that's when I fully experienced forgiveness of myself. I experienced and received God's forgiveness. Obviously, because of my crimes and my choices, I was carrying a lot of shame and guilt. Um, but that was such an authentic moment in my life, and I was like true to God. And from that day forward, like, I just found a joy. I didn't, like, everything was removed, all the shame, all the guilt. And I had a lot of work to do moving forward. Um, but God really lifted all of that from me. And that's when, no matter what my circumstances were, like, I was going to be free and I was going to find joy, even in the hardest days and the darkest moments.
Um, hmm. I was reading, it makes me think I was reading, and I think almost 2 million Americans are incarcerated right now. And there was some stat that said 95% of them will be paroled, but a large portion of them will reoffend. And, whether faith is important to you or not, it seems like it would be important to society to figure out some different ways and some strategies to sort of reduce that statistic. And I think our class that we do, I think, has a 0% recidivism rate, which is really remarkable. And in large part, I think it's due to the leadership of the wardens that have been there. There's just an amazing warden there right now, Oak. But can you describe San Quentin and kind of how it's different than other prisons?
Yeah. I think, like, the statistics you shared are absolutely true. And I think there's a quote that one of the old lieutenants used to always say and refer to as, today's prisoners is tomorrow's neighbor. And so as society, if you could really think about that, 95% of the incarcerated in America will be coming home to your neighborhoods. So today's prisoner is tomorrow's neighbor. And how do you want to set those humans, those people, up for success? And I think what makes San Quentin very unique is it's a place where you have such amazing people like yourself and Bob and all the people you're coming in, and tons of other people going in there daily. Like, I think San Quentin has over 3,000 volunteers annually going into that prison, pouring into the men, serving time. And so there's something special in that. Opportunities come, and hope. You guys are beacons of hope every time you step into those prison walls. And I do think, though, from my experience, the people who have a foundation of faith, those people withstand all the obstacles that they experience and challenges they experience when they come home. And I think in order to do time, be removed from society and live in a 4x9 prison cell year after year after year after year, you have to have some type of faith and hope. Like even the people that like deny it, like you have to hold on to something, because like that's a very easy place to give up on. And I've seen a lot of darkness. I've seen a lot of people take their lives because they just didn't have any of that. But for the people who are making it through, like, they have some type of faith, even if they don't know it yet.
Well, yours is evident. I'll tell you that, Branden, yours is really evident. You got involved with the Forward This Productions at San Quentin. I know you were part of the leadership team. I don't know if you founded it, but why was that important to get involved with that?
Yeah, so there was a program called First Watch that was a small film program. And then they all kind of paroled and left through COVID. And then there was just all this equipment and kind of like no direction. And so me and a couple of the other guys came together and were like, let's build off of this. And so we created Forward This Productions. And essentially, we were given a YouTube channel and an Instagram page from the Department of Corrections, which is like a huge milestone and accomplishment. And but that was a platform to tell humanizing stories of people incarcerated. And for me, it wasn't about me. It was about telling people stories in hope of creating change. There's so many things in policy that need to be changed. There's just so many stories that whether these men are going to ever come home or not, like their stories have power, and there's ways we could tell their stories to educate youth and just educate people, highlight faith and redemption. And so I took it very seriously. Like that was a platform that God gave me. God put that in my life. Like there wasn't accidental that I'm serving time in a prison that, has cameras and has it's the only incarcerated film crew in the world. And so I think it is a very special program. And in large part, we have a lot of people like you guys, which have supported in the past, helping us out, right? Like we could tell the stories on one side of the wall, but we need help from people on the other side to distribute them.
I love it. It is a really powerful medium, and it's still going. To that end, every time we travel to San Quentin, we always invite a friend. It's a friend of Bob's or a friend of Love Does. And without a doubt, there's always a wow moment that seems to happen in our class. I leave every time and I think, wow, that was really amazing. I don't know if it's the way that we break up into small groups, and the guys are really vulnerable and authentic, and there's no distraction. There's no cell phone. You're just really engaged. And that's so unique to the world, because that's just not the world that we live in. And so I don't know if it just allows for that kind of those wow moments. But can you think of kind of a moment that you left and you thought, oh, can't believe that?
I think I've had a lot of those wow moments, and just like God did that, like those moments throughout my life, throughout my incarceration. But there have been a couple of the biggest ones through Love Does, through you and Bob, and just all the friends you brought in. One of them was, it's kind of a long story, but to kind of tie it in quickly. The first time Bob came in, he came in with Miles Adcox, and he came in with a guy named Zach Vestine. Zach Vestine, that I didn't know at the time, was a pastor of a church that my mom, when I committed my crime in 2012, my mom went to his church and asked him if they could pray for me. Because I was obviously going through some tough times. And so 8 years later, I'm sitting at San Quentin, and here comes Bob, Miles, and this guy, Zach, who happened to be that guy my mom prayed with. And so like just instant, like God connection. But the next visit, Bob came back with Lauren Daigle, and Zach came, but Zach brought his daughter, Abby. And it wasn't a visit for Lauren to perform or sing or anything like that. It was just Bob bringing, his friend Lauren to come, visit us and see what we're doing at San Quentin. And we got them. I think the Spirit drove Lauren to get up on stage, and Abby, who's I think touring with Bethel. She's an amazing young artist, but at the time she was a 16-year-old Christian up and coming artist. Her idol was Lauren Daigle. Like, that was her dream person. And we're in prison. We're at San Quentin, obviously, and here's Lauren Daigle and the 16-year-old girl up on a stage singing, performing to about 40, 50 of us incarcerated guys. And I just remember sitting there and like, there's no explanation of how this happened other than God is making dreams come true. God is working miracles. And the Holy Spirit is really working within these prison walls. And that was
that was a day. And what was so cool about that is that last year Love Does did a gala. And when we were doing the rundown, I said, I thought it would be really cool if Branden could introduce Lauren, because Lauren came and sang at our gala. And you did. You did an awesome job. And remember what she said when she came out on stage? She said, I didn't know you got out.
Yep. I remember,
that.
Oh my God, I didn't remember you or didn't know you got out, but I remember me and you went right before me. And it just was like full circle, right? I think it was just another one of those examples of God is like always working. Like, it's not our timing. We can't like we may think and we may have visions of great things and but at the end of the day, God is always going to surprise us. I think you say it all the time. God majors in miracles. And he's always just blowing my mind. Like, literally, I feel like I'm a big vision person. And he's always blowing my mind. And that was just another one of those times.
It was. And it makes me think of other times. Music has always played a really important piece in that. I think it says what words can't in a really powerful way in those classes. I remember I don't know if you were there for the violinist Joanna came up, and there was a guy who was in our class who was also a violinist, and she was too. And so she was going to play at the end of our class. And she got up to play, and all the guys were like, hey, so-and-so's back there. He plays too. And she just said, hey, why don't you come up on stage? And said, do you know Amazing Grace? And he said, yes. And she said, why don't you start playing? And she harmonized perfectly. They did a duet violin performance. I don't even know what the official terminology of it that is, but it was like everybody was just in tears. It was just a moment. And it was just a moment of connection, and really everybody just sort of, they want that. So music really does play a super important role in all of that.
Yeah.
It makes me think too of all the times that we've gone up, and there's been some unique success stories that I think have come out of our Dream Big class. I think of Tommy, and I'll just tell his story real briefly because you connected me with him. How did you know him? How did you connect with him?
So when I got transferred from Corcoran State Prison to San Quentin, Tommy was on the bus with me. We sat side by side together and showed up to San Quentin at the same time.
Yeah. So, and you connected us recently again, and he was part of our first Dream Big class. And I remember him saying, hey, Bob was talking about dreaming big. And I thought, well, my only dream really is to get out of prison. Like, this is kind of a waste of time. And then as he sat there and talked a little bit longer, he remembered that his brother was deaf, and he had seen some guys around the yard who were also deaf. And he thought, well, what if I become certified in sign language and as an interpreter? And he did. And then this past year is his first year where he launched a class where he's teaching sign language to 30 guys that are currently incarcerated, to now be able to communicate with these other guys in the yard. And I thought what was so cool also was that two of the guards came up to him and said, hey, your next class, I want to be a part of it, because they can only communicate when the state has enough money to provide interpreters. And so this allows a whole bunch of freedom that never was before. And he's graduating his first class now. And I just, how cool. You don't have to change location to have an impact. And he's doing amazing things. Is there a story that sticks out to you, just with some guys that are doing some different things?
Yeah, I just want to touch on Tommy for a second. Tommy is someone who it would be better off if he was sentenced to life in prison, only because the way he was sentenced, his crime, I think maximum was like 6 or 9 years. But because the way California does these enhancements, they sentence him to over 60 years. And he doesn't have an opportunity to go in front of a parole board. So it will take a miracle to get him out. I think God is working on that now. I think it'll be sooner than later that he comes home. But he's someone that has said, no matter what happens, if I do the rest of my life in prison, I'm going to change lives. And his big dream happened. A lot of it was because the support you guys give and really his faith, though. Like, he stays focused, he stays true to God and to all that he's envisioned. But he has a past, and just the work that he's doing, despite probably never coming, his sentence says he's never going to come home. You're right. Like, no matter where you are, you can make a difference, and he's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and whatever days you have left, just how do you maximize those, and what do you do? And so many of the guys that we've talked to just want to be in service to other people, and they've done a lot of work since they've gotten into prison. They've had to do it on their own to get to that place, but that really is kind of the heart of a lot of the men that we are in contact with. I do also think about Matthew 25 informs a lot of what we do at Love Does. It's the hungry and the thirsty and the sick and the stranger and the naked, and don't forget those that are in prison. And that somewhere in those spaces that there's really something unique and powerful that happens, and we see it over and over again. How have you seen grace and redemption and forgiveness play out in powerful ways in prison?
I think grace, like, we're always extending grace to each other. Like, it's easy to get caught up in judgment and judging each other for the crimes that we've committed. And so I think, like, we're always extending grace in that hand, and just, who are you today? Like, who has God transformed you to be today? At the end of the day, we're all his children. I think redemption is obviously fueled by Christ, but it takes a choice. It takes a choice to change your path from doing wrong and living in the world to going the right way. And oftentimes, I think the road is very, very narrow, but there's a reason why so many scriptures are talking about prison cells, people who were in prison, because the power of redemption is so much more heightened when you're coming out of prison. I think I've seen a lot of guys who have made some horrible decisions and have come home better men than they were ever once before. And I don't think, if it wasn't for the mistakes that they made back when they were younger, they would be seen, or they would be the men they are today. And that's just redemption. I think God doesn't and this is another thing you're always reminding me of, God doesn't allow pain to go unused. And so whether it's the pain we went through or the pain that we put other people through, when you get right with Christ, there is purpose in all of that pain. And that's part of redemption.
Well said. I'm looking at you, and I, as you're talking about all these things, you're talking about people judging you. I look, and you've got, if you're just listening to this podcast rather than watching it, you have a bunch of tattoos. You got tattoos all up your neck. You got how many tattoos do you have?
You know what? I really don't know. They're kind of all connected for the most part. So I just say one.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, it's one big one. I'll tell you that. But I'm just thinking, when you're on the street and somebody walks past you, or if they know that you've been in prison, that you really have to deal with stereotypes or judgments or whatever that might be. And of course, I know you, and it's just, I really have the deepest respect for you. But it makes me think of how hard it is for so many of the guys to reenter society. and some of the stereotypes and judgments that happen there. And we have, of course, at Love Does, we've thought about how do you help with that. And we launched our Love Does scholarship program that graduates of our program can apply for a bachelor degree scholarship with us, and helps with, just getting their bachelor's or their master's degree. But how can we be helpful to guys? Maybe it's through education, but what do you think as they reenter? What are some really helpful things that they could be doing, or to just make that process a little bit more successful?
Yeah, I think one, like as a nation, as a people, we have to do better at not judging and labeling. But I think for me, and I pray for all the men who come home, that they, one, know who God is and what he says, and that they don't have to worry about what other people think, because that is an animal of itself. If going through life worrying about what everybody else thinks, you're never really ultimately going to be able to be the authentic you, and God created us all unique. And so I think as people, we got to do better at not labeling each other and putting each other in boxes. But I think ultimately it comes down to support. Support leads to opportunity. Opportunity leads to hope, and in hope there's value. And I think when you find ways to give people value, authentic, tangible value, the rest is history. I think there's a joy like no other when you're able to help someone with no motives, just like, I want to help this person. Like God takes care of everything else. Like he knows your heart and he's going to bless your path. And so I think when men are coming home, men and women, like we just need to have more support systems and create more opportunities, give more chances, because everybody has probably went through life where they needed a restart. They needed a second chance, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a failed education, whether it's a failed friendship, coming home from prison. Like we have all, or will all, come in life where like we want a second chance at something. Maybe it's not as serious as, I need a second chance at life because I was incarcerated. But I think whether it's a second chance like that, or a second chance that's so minimal, like it's all the same. And I think just providing those opportunities. Obviously, our scholarship program, I love it because education is the way to the future. And I think there is some statistics that say people who are incarcerated that have earned their education, received an AA, a bachelor's degree, like the likelihood of them reoffending and going back to prison once released is like slim to none. But it's just opportunity and love. And I think what you guys do by taking so many people into the prison and letting them experience it, one, it's helping them, because I think a lot of the people that you guys bring in, or just have come in general, they have their preconceived assumptions or biases, and then they go in, and so they kind of get their healing. God kind of works on them, like, see, like, don't ever judge the book by the cover or label these people. But then oftentimes, like, opportunities come, relationship build, and through relationships come opportunity. At the end of the day, it's opportunity. And knowing that 95% of those incarcerated coming home, there needs to be more opportunities. And so I just love the opportunities you guys have given me. Love what you're giving the guys on the inside at San Quentin. Just super grateful.
Well, and also you've made the most of those opportunities. And that's really a testament to you, Branden, and kind of who you are. But I would be amiss not to also just talk about families. Of course, Lacey, loves kids, that's for sure. And I know we start schools in all these conflict zones, because in conflict zones, it's always the kids that lose out the most. And so we've tried to kind of be helpful there. And I know when we've talked to the guys in prison, so many of them want to talk about their kids and their families. It's always on their heart. And I was also reading with those stats is that of the, almost 2 million that are incarcerated, 1 million have kids. So have kids on the outside or families on the outside. And just what the impact is on that. I think, you're married to Lacey, who's wonderful. She's outstanding. And you have a family. And can you speak to just how you've navigated marriage and family while you were incarcerated, and then as you've gotten out, and sort of the impact on families with incarcerated family members?
It starts with our choices. I made horrible choices and was living a life that wasn't right. And so I really was living selfishly because I wasn't thinking about my family and the people that I would impact. But they're innocent, right? Like our families are innocent. And so I think knowing the impact it does have, just for us, like Lacey, people are always like, oh, I can't believe you could do this time. Like that's a long time. But like my wife has a choice every day to wake up and stay loyal and faithful. And just continue to fight. And we all know like the economy and the way the world is, like surviving isn't easy, whether you're single or you have a big family as it is. And so doing it solo with 3 kids was very challenging. Luckily, like just people, good friends, you guys have helped in the past, and but it was hard. She was the warrior in it all. And I think like the wives and the families, the kids who are going about life without their parent because of incarceration, like they're warriors, and sometimes they don't know about it. Sometimes they become victims. I know for myself, like when I came home, like I had a life before I came home, and obviously there's people that had strong feelings based on my past choices in the life I was living. And so when I came home, there was a couple incidences that transpired, and I had to make a choice to move my family from the place they were living. So I had to remove my family from the church they were tied to, from the schools they were in, and move. And that had a huge impact. Like my 15-year-old son Kane, like we are still working through some of the resentments that came from, he knows it wasn't my fault. I was making the best decision, but still, I removed him from his friends, his sports teams, and so like the impact is huge. Like I know so many guys who have kids that are incarcerated. Like the kids are out here in the free world, and they're just struggling. They don't have dad. I think like we live in a world today that we need good men. We need good male role models, good male leaders, to show what it means to love each other, to show what it means to be a good husband and good father. And so for the guys who are serving time and have kids out here, like those kids don't have that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do love, it's something, but just we're launching this Christmas gift program through Love Does, and we any of the guys in our class, we got their information for their kids or their family members, that at least we want to make sure that they're not forgotten in the holidays. So that's happening right now, and at least it you think about what can you do to help, and it's just those little things, even those moments that just say, hey, you're remembered, and how do we honor them? And they, of course, they directed, so they played a part in getting those presents, hopefully to their families and their kids. So that's underway right now. So that makes me feel a little bit good. But it's when I think about you and Lacey, I do think that you guys have done a good job fighting for your kids and making sure that they recognize that they were important, and also being open to sharing some of those feelings, just as you're talking about right now with your 15-year-old, to say, hey, how are you feeling? And having some of those open, honest conversations, because those are difficult conversations to have. And you've always been really good at that. And to that point too, I think one of the things I was most impressed with when we would go up was just the relationships that you had with some of the other guys that were in the class. And you were really closer than brothers. I mean, it was the kind of friendship that you really would hope to have, with how you guys supported each other and talked to each other and was honest and vulnerable. Do those relationships carry past when you get paroled? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, some of my closest bonds are with guys who are still in prison or who I did time with. I'm gonna Chase, my old cellmate, who's a leader on the Love Does San Quentin team. We spent 4.5, almost 5 years together in a prison cell. He is like my younger brother. He calls me and Lacey and the kids once a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. Um, I make sure part of my tithing, part of my giving back is, sending packages, sending food, sending money, so those guys could be as comfortable as they can. I think going back to the gifts, the gift drive, the toy drive that we're uh, doing with the guys through your guys's through Love Does, I think like those kids are going to receive a present this year at Christmas time, and like knowing like their father had helped get it there. I think that you never know what one gift could do. That might be the gift that child holds on to until his daddy comes home. And I'm hoping and I'm praying like that's the thing that either could bring a relationship back together with the dad and a child, or it's the thing that child holds on to until his dad comes home. And so it's a powerful thing. Like, I don't want you ever to think like it's just it's just a toy. Like, I know my kids had things that I sent home that was their like prized possession until I came home. Now they moved on, but that was
I
their.
love your heart. I mean, seriously, Branden, the way that you can articulate some of those things, it's really inspiring and it's encouraging. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from you. I've learned a lot from your family. I've learned a lot from the guys at San Quentin and a lot of the people that we brought up to kind of help lead. It's really been one of the most remarkable, again, programs that I've been a part of. And when I think about you, I think a little bit about Paul, and I talk about it sometimes even in our class. He was sort of a giant in faith history, and he wrote a bunch of books of the Bible. He killed a bunch of people. He did a bunch of awful stuff, and he spent a lot of time in prison. And God used him to do extraordinary things. And when I think about you, I think God is using you to do extraordinary things. And so just sharing your story, I think it's one of hope. And I think it'll be hope and encouraging to men and women who are incarcerated and their families who love them. And so I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your vulnerability. And I appreciate your friendship. So thanks today for being on the podcast and sharing everything you shared. I think it'll be really encouraging to a lot of people. And I'm really grateful for you. So many blessings on you and Lacey and your growing family.
Yes, growing family, one on the way. Well, I have so much love for you and Bob and Drew and the whole team. And I think going back to that moment, I got to bring Lauren Daigle up on stage or call her out when we were in Nashville. She had a playlist, and I asked her, like, can you please send Rescue or play Rescue? And every time I hear that song, God, send down an army to rescue, I think of me being in prison and God sending you and Bob and just hundreds of people went through that prison that I had an interaction with that helped me get to the next day. And like, that was the army I needed that God provided for me to get through. And so I just want to encourage like everybody listening, you are part of God's army. You never know who you're going to encourage or who you're going to talk to that, that's their only hope. And they're going to hold on to those words until the next time. And so you guys have done that for me, and I'll be forever grateful and indebted to you guys.
Well, I'm forever grateful to be a part of your army too. It'll be one of the highlights of my life. So, hey, great to be with you. Thank you. Thank you for everything you shared, Branden.
Yep.
And I look forward to all the stuff that we're going to get, all the mischief, as Bob says, that we're going to get involved with in the future. Good mischief this time.
Good mischief. Good mischief. I've got plenty of bad stuff.
That's right. Good mischief. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.